In this episode of the Decision Lab, I'm going to be looking at retrospectively, which we would do in a decision lab, what happened, why it happened, and how it basically developed the skills and the training to spot and avoid situations like the one I'm going to describe. So as a case study, we're using the Horizon example for the UK Post Office. And this was a scandal that went from 2012 to 2015. Well, it went a bit longer than that. But the point is that there's a couple of players involved. So I'm going to pare it down to the simple part of it. They implemented a Horizon system, IT system. It was known to be faulty. And yet they went ahead with that. And what happened then is, as the financial discrepancies showed up, the people in charge, and I'm going to focus on one person, there's, as I say, many, but one person named Paula Van Els, who was the CEO, and I'm glancing at my notes, so sorry about that, as the CEO of the post office, she decided that it wasn't the system. So she blamed the sub-postmasters for these financial discrepancies that were caused by an IT software issue. Therefore, they prosecuted these sub-postmasters for financial crimes they did not commit. Then she lied to journalists and anybody else who questioned the viability of the Horizon system. And she used her action. She used legal action and money to defend herself against doing this and silencing anybody that raised concerns. So obviously, there's a huge fallout from an approach like that. One is that many of these submasters were wrongly convicted of financial crimes that they didn't commit. Many submasters faced bankruptcy. Sub-postmasters faced bankruptcy, imprisonment, and obviously disastrous personal consequences. And finally, it's been a scandal that has been described as one of the greatest miscarriages of justice in British legal history. Now, what happened here could happen anywhere, because what the people involved did not do was pay attention to the signals. And the first obvious signal was that the Horizon system was faulty. That was out there loud. That wasn't invisible. It wasn't underneath the surface. It was like, it's a faulty system. And so it was like sort of a damn the torpedoes approach. Let's just carry on and do it anyway. And then these signals started coming up even further. And when they started coming up, that's where you implement the skills that I'm going to talk about now and next. So that the problem is reading the context that you're in so that you can make the best decisions really fast when things go sideways. And with software, that can be any time, because it is kind of random in its in its reaction. I wrote about an example of that in Decision Making for Dummies. At any rate, so it's reading the signals. Now, obviously, the first one, software Horizon system is faulty. That's not even a signal. That's just out loud, pretty out loud. The second thing is that it's more than one sub-postmaster who is dealing with financial discrepancy. I personally use 3 signals. If I get 3 signals of the same thing, I know there's something else going on. That's just something I've developed. Everybody will have their own thing on that. So 3 of those, if 3 postmasters raised the flag and said, hey, this is, or there were financial discrepancies showing up with 3, then that would tell me there's something systematic, wrong in the system. There's something wrong at the systematic level. And so it start looking there. Now, this takes training. I mean, I used to pay attention to the series of 3 because I like the number, but it also adds up to a way of sort of isolating what's just a random thing, like a one thing, one off, from a binary thing, which could be either or in the third case, something that indicates a direction. So once you've got 3 and over, in my world, you've got something you've got to look at more deeply and away from the people. It's hard on the issue, soft on the people. So what happens then is the question is, how do you develop the skills to observe patterns that are showing up and therefore avoid what happened in this kind of instance? But as I say, it's in complex issues, it can happen anywhere, anytime. What caused it? I'll give you that before I give you the solution. There's a couple of things that can cause it. Number one, very toxic work culture. People just don't function well in that. Naturally, you're under protection. You're guarding yourself. There's a very high level of fear and anxiety and stress. And if you don't have the emotional regulation techniques or emotional mastery, Well, if you had emotional mastery, you wouldn't put yourself in that in the first place, but you need the techniques to be able to guide your way out of it. So that's and deal with the recalibration, self-regulation, so that you can be in a space to make good decisions and to spot these as signals. So that's the first thing. Fear always narrows protection, and fear always narrows the bracket. So you tend not to recognize what the signals are. And if you're determined to retain your status or to maintain your position, then you're going to hold the line on a very narrow frame and miss all of the detail that inform the context you're in and that inform what's going on underneath the surface. So that's the second reason. The third thing was integrity. This is a matter of character. If you screw up, just say you did. I got a lot more respect out of that than you do by lying and pretending you didn't screw up. So these kinds of situations create character, for better or for worse. That's something the individual makes a decision on. And that is then a great opportunity to develop the strength of character it takes to really lead in today's world, in any world, but certainly today's world. So that's the background. Now I want to look at the skill set that goes with it. When I was wandering through the library the other day, I found a book this one, and it talks about how to read water, clues and patterns from puddles in the sea. Now, water, metaphorically, water, at least in dream interpretation, it stands for emotion. So the question is, how do you read the patterns in the emotion? Patterns of emotion or patterns of anything for that matter. And that's where the secret lies in observing what's coming up in any kind of system that is an anomaly. So I'm going to show you a map that comes from the Polynesian area. It's a stick map. Now, you and I might look at that and go, that's not a map. What are we talking about here? What is that thing? Well, we would associate a map with, I've got a couple here just for fun, with a topographic, the Chickamas River in the Whistler area. There's another one here. This is nice and waxed, really pretty little map of the Mamquam area. So that's closer to Squamish on the Whistler side again. So road maps, where's my map of Sweden? Here's my map of Stockholm. Here's another example of a map that we would recognize as being familiar. This is the transit system in Stockholm. I've got a box of maps. I love maps because they're visual, they're tangible. You can open them up and you can also see where you are in context with everything else, which you can't do on your phone. So going back to this map that is done by Polynesian navigators, Polynesian navigators use a stick map to map swells and currents. Now, these people didn't have instruments. They simply used their sensing capacity. This is not a mental capacity. They used their sensing capacity to feel the currents. And then with that information could sail 1,500, 3,000 kilometers. It's in one of my podcast episodes that done by Wade Davis when he describes that. So, he's not the only one either. So this is a different way of sensing culture. It's a different way of sensing emotional undercurrents. I've talked to surfers who were, out there on the waves and said, I felt a sense, sharky sense, and they got out of the water and there was a great white shark underneath them. The same man was the mortgage broker at the time, and he could see and sense the upcoming 2008 debacle. And so he got out of the mortgage business very quickly and was fine when it hit because he could see it ahead. So this sensing capacity then is something everybody has. Yes, it does need development. It needs a little bit of fine tuning, but that is what you have available to you. Some of you have it probably in spades, in fact, maybe too much, and would like to have a little quieter, incoming environment from the noisy world we live in. But when you're working with culture, you're working with workplaces, and you're working with complex decisions, sensing is really the best way to see patterns as they show up, know what the signals are, sit down, map them out, know what your signals are, and then you can work and navigate more accurately and more effectively with that information. So what do you want to do to start? Well, I think that Tristan Gooley's book, which is all about reading nature signals, all about reading water patterns, it's got some great ideas. I mean, it's that world lateraled into your world. What are the puddle patterns that I see? What does water do in my environment? What are the currents of emotion that run through my organization? What are the currents of emotion that run through me? So you can start to develop it just by looking at and observing without judgment what you're seeing, what you're feeling, and what you're observing on any scale, because that's where you're going to get your cues and the signals to know how to move through things next. I hope this gave you some valuable information. Thanks very much for joining me on this edition of Decision Lab. You're on my Substack channel, or if you're on my YouTube channel, please subscribe and join in. And if you're an unpaid subscriber, then I would appreciate you considering to become a paid subscriber so that we can support the work that will help really navigate a world of uncertainty and use it to co-create something that is beneficial for all life on the planet. My name is Donna Jones. Thank you very much.